Okay, don't feel badly if you think you don't know a lot of details. Just having some basic things in your mind as we move on in a little bit will help you tremendously. Plus, you will have access to your resources during the project if you would like to use them. So, moving on and talking about literacy, culturally responsive literacy, and looking at it really across the curriculum, I think that the first thing I want to point out is that the elementary people are very comfortable in most cases doing a lot of different things and even approaching things almost from a thematic sense, where because elementary school teachers oftentimes are teaching all of the content areas, they can find central themes and talk about the theme during a language arts lesson, talk about it in a science lesson, talk about it in math and social studies, and so on. I will tell you, in my escapades this year and doing classroom observations and coaching sessions with current teachers, I am finding that a lot of elementary schools in North Carolina are moving toward the team approach, meaning all of the first grade teachers are divided, or third grade teachers, or whatever that means, so that these teachers teach language arts and social studies, and these teachers teach math and science, and the students actually move rather than being all self-contained with the same teacher. There's some great feedback about it. There's also, as I'm sure you can imagine, some pushback and some mixed feelings with that. But I think it's important that we understand, even in secondary school, that what we do in our classroom makes a difference in other classrooms. It really makes a difference. And I know that when I was a school-based person and working with teachers, I would often hear, well, I can't worry about what so-and-so's doing because I got to teach algebra. And I can't worry about what so-and-so's doing because I got to teach math or excuse me, algebra 2 or biology or whatever the content is. Like, I have to focus on my standards, and that's about all I can handle. And if any of you have looked at the secondary standards, they're daunting. Even in music. Like, who'd have thought? A lot of people look at subjects like art and music and foreign language as like the fun stuff we do in school, and it just takes takes the focus off of the real classes for a while. And that is really a myth that we all have to accept. It's not like that at all. There's a great amount of rigor in the arts and music and foreign language and physical education with the right teacher. I've seen it. Yeah. Yeah. So I bring this up because I want us to, for the next couple of hours, think a little bit outside the box. I know Kareem can do that. And everybody else too, in terms of other subject areas, so that even if you are not responsible for delivering instruction about math or about science, you can have an understanding about what we need to pay attention to in all of the content areas, so that you can begin to have professional conversations with teachers who do teach those subjects. I've also seen that when high school teachers especially begin to pay attention to what's important to other people and have conversations about what's happening in other people's classes, they often just kind of naturally team up and talk about, well, why don't we do a thematic approach? Let's see what happens. Let's pick something for the month of September, and we all plan our lessons around it and see what happens. Or let's do this in September and October. And it doesn't have to be a theme like the Pilgrims. No offense. The Pilgrims have their place in social studies. But they could be more innovative in terms of what's happening in the real world. Like, let's talk about the coal ash issues in the river. That is in North Carolina. It's happening now. We could talk about it. I know you're going to think this is crazy, obviously, in science. We could talk about it in social studies. We could talk about it in math, for sure. And we could talk about it in language arts. There are lots of pieces of literature that involve rivers and really important pieces of literature. We could also sing about it, even if we're singing the blues. So I mean, I want you to start really thinking about how does what I do make a difference in another area, because it really does, and it really can. The other thing we're going to talk about is vocabulary and the tiers of vocabulary that we work with in terms of stuff that we see all the time, stuff that we see only in our content areas, and stuff that we see across the content areas that we often forget about. Processing words, connecting words. And they're all language, and they're all really important. So I won't bore you with too much theory today. I don't want you to think that I'm giving you this information because I think you don't know it. I think you know it. But I think sometimes just a quick blitz about, I got to remember how many grams of protein is in an ounce of cheese. Even though I know and I eat it every day, let's have a quick reminder. Having a large vocabulary really does make a difference in terms of student achievement. Frequently, we see that students who are not performing well obviously have language gaps, whether they're native speakers of English or otherwise. And so having a command of a large vocabulary is really an important detail to remember. I like these numbers because they're kind of astounding. The average 6-year-old, and I say average, we all know that there are going to be statistical outliers more and more as we speak on either side of this. But on average, a 6-year-old knows about 8,000 words. That's a lot. And they're really supposed to be learning about 3,000 to 5,000 more words per year. All kinds of words. In order to graduate from high school, students need somewhere around 50,000 words. Don't be scared. Or maybe you should be scared. I don't know. However you want to look at it. But this is very possible. Lots of people make it. And some people go far beyond this with their vocabulary sets. But it's also drawing the attention to the fact that we need to know how to teach lots of kinds of language in all subject areas. This is the other piece that I want to talk about for just a little bit, because I think it's something that is kind of new in terms of awareness. And I think that it can really make a difference in your classrooms. And it's the notion of oracy. We talk about literacy all the time. And when we think about literacy, we think about reading and writing. But when we talk about oracy, it's kind of a new word. We're talking about the oral command, verbal command of the language, and demonstrating academic language while you speak. Most of the time when we have conversations, they're informal. They might be topic related, they might be content specific, but they aren't necessarily using quote unquote big SAT words. So, why not? How can we get teachers to have a really strong, heightened awareness about the fact that we have to look for ways to shape academic conversations in the classroom? And the easiest way to do this is to provide academic conversation prompts. And there's a fabulous resource here, and you have access to this PowerPoint on the Dropbox. But I will tell you, Jeff Zweers, he's a professor out of Stanford. So when we do something in a classroom, and we ask students to talk about it, how do we normally do that? What are some ways that we ask students to talk about things? Okay, so they're in a group, turn and talk. Discuss it with your group. What else? Discuss with a partner. Having an opinion station. I love that. That's awesome. Absolutely. And these are all phenomenal ways. So we're going to turn up the volume a little more. We're going to turn up the intensity a little bit more. Yes. So I'm imagining statements like, while I respect your opinion, I'd like to disagree. I can justify my answer with, yes. And you'll see a lot of that on Jeff's website. Very similar to that. So the point is, we want students to sound intelligent because they are. We want them to shape the way that they speak in a scholarly way. The other thing that it does, not only is it kind of cool, the other thing that it does is it trains their brains to produce scholarly, intelligent language. And when they produce it while they speak, they will produce it when they write. In a much, yes, it's a much more intensive way. I promise you will see the difference. And absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So I have a quick story to share with you because I think especially in elementary school, sometimes there's a little bit of I don't want to call it skepticism because it's not that, but maybe there's a thought pattern that, well, this is really for the older kids. And the reality is it can start with you guys in Head Start. I've seen 4 and 5-year-olds have academic conversations. And my question to a lot of elementary school people sometimes is, well, if there's a big word and a simple word that means the same thing as the big word, why not just teach them both? It's okay. So the story is, I have one brother. He's older than I am. His name is David. He's an engineer, and he's a total nerd. Okay? Total, complete geek. Love the guy. The only cool thing about him is he also rides a Harley. He has 2 sons. Of course he does, right? I'm visiting Wisconsin. He lives in Wisconsin because when we both left West Virginia. He went north, I went south. I don't know why he went north. There's cheese and snow up there, but whatever. It's fine. I'm visiting one year, and I'm playing with my nephew, who at the time is 5 years old. I'm sitting on the floor, and he's got a bunch of Legos around, and he's building something, and he's got his little fat chubby fingers, and he's putting this stuff together, and he's like, he with his Wisconsin accent, "Hey, Joni, look at this." And he like chubby finger points to something on his Lego bridge, whatever. "Look here, this is the fulcrum." My eyes, I was looking at him, and I'm looking at my brother who's like reading the paper, not even paying attention to what we're doing in the recliner. I said, "What is that?" "Look here, it's the fulcrum, and it does this, and it does this." And he had a much squeakier voice than that, but you get the point. And so I said, "Alex, how do you know what a fulcrum is?" And he looked at me like I was the dumbest person on the face of the earth. Like, "What do you mean? Everybody who plays with Legos knows what a fulcrum is." "Well, Dad taught me." And I thought, oh no. Now I have to give my brother credit for something. Like, So I look over at my brother and I'm like, "David, what are you doing? Teaching a 5-year-old fulcrum? Like, what the heck is wrong with you, you geeky engineer?" "Well, he's building stuff and I'm helping him build stuff, and what else am I supposed to call it?" And I thought, oh man, not only do I have to give him credit, he just showed me up. Me the teacher, me the ESL teacher who's always given him grief about what a dork he is and a square nerd engineer, he just showed me up. And I looked at him and I'm like, oh You're right. So, without knowing what he was doing, he explained to my nephew in 5-year-old words what a fulcrum does and what it means. But he gave it the right name. And I thought, I can't really accept this. There's no way. So I said to Alex, go do something else and come show me another fulcrum in your house. I don't really think there's more than one in here. Sure enough, chubby fingers, here we go. Come on, let's go in the garage. There's all kinds of stuff. Points to fulcrums. He knows what a lever is and what it does. And he knows that it's called a fulcrum. So I'm thinking to myself since that point on, he's now 21. Why do we just not call things what they're called? And if we explain it properly, they get it. I was embarrassed because it took me like 40 minutes to really sit back and think, I don't even think I know what a fulcrum is. Like, I think my nephew knows more about what a fulcrum is than I don't remember that from science class in high school. So, I had to look it up, and I was okay, but I thought, why do we do that? Why can't we just call stuff what it's called? So my point in that whole story is when we ask students to have academic conversations, if we prompt them accordingly, they'll say what you ask them to say. I've heard 4 and 5-year-olds say when they're having a conversation about something and the prompts are given, and sometimes teachers create like a bank on the wall or some kind of handout that the kids keep in their notebooks. Whatever works for you, works for them, works for me. Eventually, as with all scaffolds, the use of those tools just falls off, and they will begin to just talk like that all the time. So I'm not clear, Tori, on what you told me, 5 years old. I'm not clear. Could you please reiterate for me? And they say it. Or, I find that very interesting. I'd like to know more. Rather than, oh, tell me something else. You can, if you give them the prompts, that little people will use them. Obviously, young adults will use them as well. If you start coming up with these and you ask them to use them, you will find it's humorous, but it's also really, really cool. And the high school people can step into a pre-kindergarten classroom and hear all this going on. And it's more than being polite. My letter group is deficient. May I please borrow? They'll get it. It's really funny. Really, really funny.